I've been playing Throne of Liberty for the past weeks. Initially, I wanted to make a review video, but then I made up my mind to wait until I've experienced the endgame state to add my share on whether should you play the game or not, because other than that, yeah, it's a free-to-play game worth of 30-ish to 40-ish hours through the main campaign where you don't have to pay a single penny. There are no paywalls, and really, like any MMO, you have to make a decision on whether are you going to invest your time in it. Is this going to be your next big MMO to play, or is it just not for you? A lot of it has to do with whether if it's a pay to win or not. And you know, there's not a general consensus in this game being paid to win or not, and a lot of that has to do because of how enthusiastic people can get about these games and wanting them to do better, to be more popular. Also because there are no institutions that abide for the term pay to win, and it's all based on the internet consensus, since there is nothing semantically abiding for the term on itself, in which case I will give you my perception, which might be different than yours, or someone else's for that matter, and then I'll show you all of the various systems that you have to go through Throne of Liberty to gear up in any kind of content that you should expect on this game, and what's the experience of that endgame. So first, let me tell you, what do I consider to be pay to win? Any kind of real money you pay on any game to get experience, items, armor, weapons, materials, whether if it's a single player game or not. A lot of people say that single player games cannot be paid to win because you're not fighting people, so you're not losing against anyone. I do not consider for that to be the case because you're still paying to win the game. Kill bigger stuff faster, get access to certain areas sooner, breeze through the game more difficult areas without that much of a struggle, such as the case of Shadow of War. If you were not there at launch, I was. And to unlock the secret real ending, you had to go through a very difficult siege marathon that people were claiming for it to be too difficult, whilst the players that were actually purchasing armor, weapons, gear, they were just having a blast. They ended up removing on its entirety the paid gear that you would be able to get, and they actually downscaled the difficulty of that thing. That it was just a wreck. So there's that. Now, luckily enough, this is actually multiplayer, and more so, the true endgame on Throne of Liberty is PvP. So do not come expecting to find the PvE kind of endgame like you have in World of Warcraft or The Elder Scrolls Online. Not that there is not any, but it's just not as deep. And that's intentionally, because the game is designed for PvP endgame. The few activities that you will find in the PvE, they are designed so that you can gear up first for the PvP. So if you're not that much into that, that would be a first deterrence. If you're still curious and want to play the PvE for yourself, join a guild, do guild raids, and what I can tell you from my experience, which might be different from someone else's, is that I experienced every single PvE endgame activity at just 1800 gear score, and you don't really need anything else, and I didn't pay a single penny for that experience and for me to be able to go through all of those activities. By the time that you reach the endgame, your gear score should be ranging in between 16 to 1800s. That gives you access to the endgame dungeons, open world dungeons, the contracts, the world bosses, if you have a guild, the guild bosses and guild raids, and so on and so forth. Now, there's always the classic jerk elitist that will say, and you will find them in the world chat, that you need the very minimum of 2200 gear score to be able to be proficient at the endgame. Well, I can tell you that I did every dungeon, every guild boss, every contract, every world dungeon, every world boss with the lowest possible gear, because you need to do that first to start gearing up your character. So you actually start the game with low gear score, and there's not that much of a wall that you have to bypass beyond that point, other than players having greater gear score than what you do. The most difficult things to do is kill bosses, especially bosses with random people from the dungeon finder that have low gear score, and sometimes they don't actually read the chat, and you have to, because every boss has different mechanics, and both the party of full 2500 gear score can clap the same way that a bunch of 1800s can, if you're not familiar with the boss's mechanics and if you're not doing your job as you're supposed to. But in reality, all you need to do is just be polite, communicate, and after a couple of attempts, you can quite literally kill anything without it being super powerful. I do want to emphasize that I did all of this kind of content when I was on my 1800 skier score. Now, in that regard, there's not a wall that you can only bypass with more power, like in World of Warcraft or the Elder Scrolls, where you need certain gear score to go through the next dungeon or the next raid, so that you can slowly and bits by bits manage to get to the final most monstrous weekly boss of the game to get the high chance of getting the end tier armor that you want from that boss. The goal in here is to do those activities that you have on the open for you, and at the end to start gearing up so that you can gear better. Your better gear is better than the PvP opponent that you're fighting against has, whether you're doing 3v3 arenas, friendly matches, ranked matches, or guild versus guild PvP. The endgame here is to get hot stuff as fast as you can to be the best. So that being said, and simply put, it is a very pay to win game. In the market store, you can purchase mostly cosmetic gear and a few upgrade materials that are never going to be nearly enough to upgrade to tops your endgame purple gear. That's where the auction house comes in. Purchase stuff from other players that will sell with real money. Here, you can purchase basically everything. The top endgame weapons and armor from guild and world bosses that you'll never have the chance to get them because there's like 40 guild members hoping for that small percentage window of actually getting the endgame armor or weapon that you actually want, and that if you don't get, you actually have to wait 1 week before it resets to get that the slimmest chance of being able to get that endgame top tier meta armor or weapon. And now the materials to upgrade your gear and the traits to get that endgame gear to be dandy and fancy, the best perks that otherwise you would have to grind for them, you can also purchase them in there, and if you're grinding for them, you have just a very small chance of getting them. So if you're lucky, let's say that you're lucky, that you get that one piece of armor that you now have to upgrade and slot 3 top meta perks. Those perks can be upgraded set amount of times, let's say 4 times each, and you have to go through that process for every single piece of gear: weapon, secondary weapon, helmet, chest, hands, legs, feet, ring, second ring, talisman, and belt. I am not joking when I say that all of that RNG goes up to 100 times that you need to upgrade your stuff to be top meta. Something that a pay-to-player, and trust me, there are many of them, can just swipe about, let's say, 6 grand, 6,000 to go to the auction house and have all of that in just a handful of minutes. I know as well that there are many free-to-players that can come in and will say that I am just a free-to-player and I know how to earn enough money, I know how to earn enough lucent in the auction house by grinding and selling the stuff that I have and I don't need. I know how to get all of that stuff to be proficient. And yes, that's doable. You certainly can. If you're a free-to-player, you can do such a thing. But it takes a titanic amount of time and investment, weeks, months even. When, like I said, there's players that can just come, swipe, and be full nice and dandy. I'll give you an example of this. I joined a very strong guild. There was this time when we were dominating the fight on a guild fight. We had to hold the high grounds that we already had. It was just us, our guild, enough to keep 2 guilds at bay, trying to take that place from us. They wouldn't be able to beat us. We were holding that grounds like pros. And then this guy showed up with his healer. And me personally, he was 2-shotting me. My gear score at that time, it was 2500. With decent health perks that I managed to amass for a PvP setup, because I actually did want to invest in PvP, and we just couldn't stop the dude. Like, we lost the high ground at the last minute because of that. By taking a look at him, you could tell that he was wearing the world and guild bosses gear that was probably tops with the most OP meta perks, health, hit chance, crit chance. The dude was just a real monster, and he certainly paid to win against us. A modest but strong guild that was holding ground against we were holding our grounds against 2 other guilds that they were just not able to beat us until this guy showed up. It happened once, but I will certainly remember it forever. despite that, I am playing with my guild. I still do my daily dungeons, my world dungeons, my guild weeklies, and have fun. I would be lying to you though if I said that this is not a situation that you might not bump into as well. If you're a PvE player, mostly player, there's like really not that much to do in here, and every time you gear up and get stronger, there really is nothing to be, you're not going to find a higher challenge to try that new gear that you got, because everything is just the same when it comes to PvE, and all of that gear, it's only going to be sufficient to bypass the difficulties that you might encounter on PvP. And if you're not that much into PvP, then there's like really not that much in here. But there is like some kind of content, there is grinding, and there is RNG if you want to invest into that. Anyways, that's what I can tell you about the endgame of Throne and Liberty if you want to invest yourself in this game. It's certainly a fun game, but yes, it is pay to win. Anyways, if you like the content, like and very super appreciated. Also, there you go, you're just a beautiful person. You're in the go, just a beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.